Okay, take two. The mute monster got me. Um, Welcome to another episode of Ask Megan. This is a LinkedIn Live series where I take questions that people ask me in email or in conversations, and I share them with the folks in my LinkedIn community, not only the questions, but the advice and the answers that I gave the people who were asking. And today's question came from a woman who attended a keynote that I gave recently on trust. She wrote to me afterwards saying, I really think that trust is an issue in my organization, but I don't have any data to back it up because trust isn't really something we think about, right? It's kind of a catch 22. So, how do I get other people to consider that trust, in fact, might be an issue when I don't have any evidence of that other than my own experience? And I thought this was a good question to share because I'm pretty sure that it's one that a lot of folks who are contemplating trust programs or the need to address trust more face. So I want to give you three recommendations for how to kind of build the case or at least start to build some evidence if there is a trust issue or understand there is a trust issue. You may think there is and there may not be. So here are three things that I recommend people do. Um, the first is to get really clear about what level of trust you are talking about, because trust is not this big amorphous blob, right? It could be an issue with customer trust. Customers don't necessarily trust you. It could be an issue of trust among employees. It could be that employees don't trust leaders or leaders don't trust employees, right? Trust is a phenomenon that exists between two people or multiple people. So before you start looking for anything, it helps to kind of narrow your focus and know specifically where you're looking. Once you know that, the second recommendation is to take a look at the existing questions you have in your surveys, whether it's customer surveys, employee surveys, um, because even in organizations that don't track trust or ask questions that include, the actual T word, they do tend to track things that are really important elements of trust. And so you can start to pull that in. For example, one of the things that determines whether or not someone trusts you is if they think you have their best interests at heart. I have a client who recently asked a question or added a question to their customer survey that says, I believe such and such cares about my business. That's a trust indicator. It's not coming right out and asking, do you trust this company? But is absolutely a signal of a critical element of what it means for someone to trust you. Another set of questions, especially if you're in B2B, that you can use is around transparency and open, honest communication. Tends to be that if people are not transparent or open and honest, we assume they're hiding something. And so, if your customers are not happy with your level of transparency or your level of communication, it's a good signal that they probably don't trust you. Now, you may not be hiding anything, but the human brain needs to fill white space. And when they don't know what it is you're not sharing, of course, people tend to make up the worst. So questions about transparency are another good place to look. Fairness is another key element. Is your pricing fair? Are your policies fair? So if you have any of those kinds of questions in your existing surveys, you can pull those in and explain how those are all key elements of trust that roll up kind of to this bigger idea that affects how people decide to interact with you. And then the third recommendation that I have for evaluating trust in your organization is to look for a few key behaviors. So the thing about trust is when people trust each other, there tends to be not much to see here because there's a whole lot of stuff you don't do. But things like hoarding information or contacts. I have several clients where we've tried to do some customer research and some customer interviews. And you would have thought that we were trying to get the entry code to Fort Knox. People refused or were extremely reticent to give up customer contact information. And that's a clear sign that they don't trust their peers, even in a customer experience team, to treat the customer well or to deliver a good customer experience. That in and of itself is obviously a problem. If you always CC the boss, you or other people, if there's someone who's constantly CCing the boss or CCing everyone under the sun in an email, that's a sign that people don't trust each other because they either want proof of here's what I said and here's what was done in the meeting, or they want to kind of CYA and make sure that everybody knows because they're afraid that it's going to come back to them and somebody's going to say, well, you did this or you didn't do this. And the last sort of physical behavioral sign that I look at, and by the way, these are all things that I look at when I work with a company or if I start working with a company. I am kind of scanning the behavioral landscape and the tone landscape just to get a feel for, okay, what kind of environment am I working in here? And the last one is, if you're in physical meetings, where do people sit? If people tend to sit clustered all around with their own people from their own team, versus sitting interspersed and going, oh, hey, here's a person I don't see or talk to all that often. Let me sit next to them. The cliquishness and the clustering tends to be a surefire sign that there is not a lot of trust between the people and the groups in those organizations. Now, I know that these are not hard and fast signs. It's not clear data that says we have a trust problem. But the thing about trust is that it's fluid and it's invisible. So very often when we're broaching the subject, we have to look for signs and signals that may come from people who don't necessarily even realize that there is a trust issue, either that they don't trust people, they're not consciously aware of that, or that they might be not trusted. This is particularly true in leadership. It's very easy for leaders who don't spend a lot of time with folks multiple levels down them to kind of overestimate the extent to which people in the organization trust them and trust that they're sharing all the information. So start to think about, if you're concerned that trust is an issue in your organization, take a look at some of these things, start to think about it, and then broach the subject cautiously. Because the other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to say, hey, nobody trusts you. Nobody trusts each other. It can come off as feeling very combative. So you want to, try to broach the subject with a little more softness and say, there's not a lot of great communication. And I think people don't necessarily feel as confident that they can rely on another team. I'd love to build that kind of confidence up. Again, it depends on the situation and the people you're talking to and how sensitive they are and what role they play in the trust equation. But having a combination of data, behavioral evidence, and then an actual impact on, and here's what it's causing to happen in the business, either with customers or internally, that is an issue that we could benefit from solving. That at least will open the door. And this is not a conversation that you're going to, go to someone one time and say, oh, that's it, we have a trust issue, it's off and running, right? It is a very gradual process usually of raising the issue of trust, unless there's something extreme that happens, like a cybersecurity event or something. But if you read the newsletter article that I published earlier this month, you know that I believe that trust is hugely important in the success of a business, trust with customers and trust with employees. So hopefully these are a few things that you can start to look out for and start to have that conversation with people in your organization going, trust can be a really powerful tool if we invest in it. And I think we have an opportunity here. And here are some of the signs that I see that make me think that. So hopefully those tips and the answer to that question are useful to you. I will be back next month with another question. I don't know exactly which one yet. I have a lot of good ones, so I'm going to choose probably when we get closer. But I thank you for your time today, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you have questions that you want me to address on Ask Megan, please absolutely send them my way. Thanks and have a great day.